one of the things I definitely learned was like every single company I talked to where they had to innovate or make a change or take a risk that either catapulted them or it was a mistake. And then they went another way and then pivoted another way. So I think what we're building here, it's revolutionary for the podcast industry. We're going to have guests who have revolutionized industries like food and technology and AI. And it's going to be super interesting because what I love about it is that in all these cases, I know they had to innovate or they were done. And it's a scary thought, but it definitely gets you up off the couch.
You are listening to Innovate or Die, the podcast for companies that refuse to stand still. I am one of your hosts, Travis Albritton, and joining me, the illustrious, the muscular, Robert Tuckman. How's it going, Rob?
I love muscular. See, it's this T-shirt that I'm wearing, and this is why I only wear this T-shirt. It's a nice, like, tight fit, so it actually looks like very muscular.
Oh, 100%.
That's my secret. Sorry, I had to let you know. Thank you.
So it's just the shirt.
Get,
it's not
some bicep. In
yeah. It's not the working out. It's the T-shirt. Got it.
Yeah. It's a T-shirt really helps.
Perfect. So this is episode 1. For anyone that listened to the trailer, like a short 3-minute sneak peek about what the podcast is about. But on this first episode, we just want to dig into our background, specifically when it comes to Amaze Media Labs and what our company does, what we're building. Because part of the podcast will not just be interviewing guests and having them share their expertise and their insight and how they're innovating in their industries, but also using ourselves as a case study and sharing the things that we're doing, the things that work, the things that fail spectacularly, and just kind of like laying it all out there so that you can take some of the principles of the things that we're learning and apply them forward in your business. So Robert, first and foremost, do we get everything okay by legal? Like we can open the kimono all the way open, we can share all the backdoor secrets and let people know what the real deal is, or?
Yeah, I think we have to run that by Brett Sklar. he's our legal expertise. But hopefully he'll give us the okay. But yeah, I think we're good. Let's just open it up and let people know about what we're doing. And as you said, it's a great way to look at it and in real time and case study, because there's a lot of failures, a lot of successes, and we're trying to innovate.
For sure. So let's start off just talking about Amaze Media Labs. So it's your third company that you've really invested in and built. Where did it start? How did you get the idea for Amaze Media Labs? What was the nexus point, the idea where you said this could actually be something?
Well, it's really funny because I don't think I've ever told the story of how we came up with the name, because I think people just think that Amaze stands for, like amazing producers, products. But I just want to get that out there because it really is, my wife, Amy, for the A, M is Mia, the other A is and, the Z is Zoe, my other daughter. And my mom, who unfortunately has passed away in the last couple of years, is the E, Esther. And we were in Puerto Rico sitting at a restaurant. And I'm like, girls, great businesses start on a napkin. And anyway, I wrote that out. And the plan at the time really was I went to Brett, Brett Sklar we talked about, who has been a partner of mine in the first 2 businesses that we created in the sports and entertainment industry. And I had this idea of really working and taking podcasts and putting them into live events, because that was our entire business for so many years, live events, live experiences. And our thought was there were so many great podcasts that you could go see, or we could put events together with multiple podcasts from one genre or another. And COVID happened, so that got scrapped. And what happened was, at the same time, a friend of mine, Bill Shaw, who is the president of Entrepreneur, I had gone to him and said, I love audio. And, I want to do a podcast. And he's like, why don't you host our How Success Happens podcast? It does really good. We don't know why, but it does really good. And I think Bill thought I'd do 2 episodes and be like, F this. This is way too much work. But I will tell you, I am on episode probably 3, maybe close to 300 episodes, which has been such an incredible learning experience. But to get to the point, the reason or the pivot with Amaze was that I would bring on guests, and you'd have the, entrepreneur was able to secure maybe the founder of Lululemon or the founder of Warby Parker. And I would realize, why don't these companies or individuals leading these companies have their own podcast, their own content? And that was kind of a little bit of a light bulb moment. And that was a little bit of a pivot, and talked to Brett, and we decided to start creating podcasts, although we had never created a podcast for companies. And that started and took off really during the COVID years, first couple of COVID years. And we started creating podcasts for all types of Fortune 500 companies. And then the one thing we quickly learned was that the hardest thing in podcasting, and I had learned this with my podcast as well, although Entrepreneur was backing it, was to gain audience, to grow audience, to get listeners, for people really to find you, or discover you. And that's when Brett, he had, was really researching, and he talked to some guy in England, and he's like, you got to talk to this guy, Dylan. And anyway, Dylan, our Michael Jordan of the Amaze team, and Travis, of course, you're LeBron, but, Dylan was, someone who had worked in audience development and created a technology, an ad tech that really drove downloads and listenership. And the greatest thing was that now we could target specific listeners. And when we did a podcast for a company, instead of having maybe a couple hundred downloads or listens, we could have thousands. And there was an ROI, and companies and individuals saw the value in that. And we really leaned into the audience growth side of the business as well. And that's where, we are today, and we can get into the specifics, but that's how our company started, as a company that was going to do experiences around live podcasts, and became a company that created podcasts for brands. And then really, as I said, we've been leaning into, because it's the biggest opportunity, we believe, in growing audience for podcasters and potentially YouTubers. And we have a whole game plan, as you know.
For sure. Well, and I love how, the napkin thing, that's a great legacy story, right? Oh, we're at this restaurant in Puerto Rico, and we figured out the right acronym to make something, and that turns into a t-shirt, and it turns into a brand logo and a company. But I want to circle back to the initial idea, doing the events, because your background, you talk about live events and experiences. It wasn't throwing birthday parties. You were like doing bulk purchasing of Super Bowl tickets and like those kind of events. Where did you see the opportunity? Like you mentioned, having people on your podcast, guests, like, why doesn't this company have a podcast? But where did you see that podcast was this untapped opportunity that you had a unique position to bridge the gap, even though you said yourself, like, you hadn't personally built this podcast production empire before, but you saw the need, you saw the gap, you saw that you could fill it, or at least figure out how to fill it. What was that like? What was that decision process?
Well, even after starting a couple businesses and having, them be successful, I was a little anxious about it. This was an area I just jumped into because I always loved audio, always loved radio. And I just had this feeling, because you could tell how I would get these, PR pitches, like 10, 15 a day from all of these like prominent folks who trying to get on podcasts. And I was just thinking to myself, like, that's great. Like, I'd love to interview you, but like, you have the ability nowadays to put out your own content in long form, authentic conversations, really to be thought leaders or show thought leadership. And it just hit me. I'm like, why wouldn't you do this? Especially for the cost when you're out there, these big companies, creating, 30-second commercials or getting sound bites in the newspaper. Why wouldn't you create your own content? And this is a really cheap way to do it. And what I learned was that, as I didn't know how to create a podcast, that not a lot of people knew how to create a podcast or the time involved. And it was funny because a lot of the first time we worked with people, it'd be like, yeah, some kid in our marketing group listens to podcasts, so he tried to create it for us and it was really terrible. And that's when I was like, you know what? Having worked with a lot of companies and brands in the past, that there's an opportunity here to build a company that really white gloves and creates incredible sounding, great content, podcast. And then, we realized soon enough you needed vodcast, the video version as well, as that grew. And that was really kind of the impetus behind thinking like, hey, this could work. And we realized soon enough that maybe it was timing because of COVID, that people weren't putting money into events, so they had extra budget. And they realized this is a great way to reach people. People were tuning out of their webinars, they were getting so boring after a while. But that was really the gut. I usually go on my gut, the gut feeling that there's something here.
Right. So you assembled the dream team. You said, all right, let's go, pilfer iHeart, get some producers, let's get some people from over here and like build our production team. Cause you're out there selling it. You're getting these brands on board. Yeah, let's do a podcast. How much does it cost? And you're, I don't know, just make up a number. That sounds big enough. And then go and hire people to go do the thing you just sold in classic entrepreneur fashion. And then you actually start doing these high level productions for these brands. And then you mentioned that even if you're a big brand, you're a big company, and you start doing content, you start doing content marketing, it's just like Field of Dreams. You can build it. Doesn't mean they're going to show up. It doesn't mean people are going to start listening to it. Was there a particular moment or a particular point in time where you just decided, we have to figure this out? No one else is figuring out how to do paid media-driven audience growth that's profitable. There has to be a way to do this. Was there a moment in time? Was there a client that walked away because you made a great podcast, but you couldn't grow the audience? Like, tell me that story. When did you decide, no, we're going to pivot and we're going to make this happen?
Well, my thought was I'm a hustler. I go sell. Oh, you know what? I'll sell and companies will want it. They get all the branded content and, they have all of that and they'll get views. And even if we, only have a certain amount of downloads, they'll still want to do it. And Brett actually, to his credit, was always like, if we don't figure out, how to really drive audience, CMOs and marketers, they're just going to say, we're not getting the return. So he was ahead of me, for sure, in terms of that, like most things, and just realizing that, that we needed that. And then I realized it. We did this incredible podcast for Ford, and Ford Motor Company, right? And around sustainability and the greening of cities. And we were looking at a few hundred downloads. And I'm like thinking, how is that even possible? That it's an incredible podcast. The content was super, professional host, incredible thought leaders being interviewed. And that's when it really hit me too, like, whoa, this isn't going to be as easy as, throwing the podcast up on their social media accounts or, all of the things that everyone tells you to do and what works. And that, of course, is when, Brett had already been at it and had met, Dylan and or started talking to Dylan, and we started using Dylan and working with him as a partner when he had his business, and we were just blown away. First off, he's a great guy and super trustworthy and just like friendly and quiet and brilliant, of course, engineer. But I think he got a kick out of me and Brett, and we just did a lot of business together, and we were like, this is the best thing ever, because now we could really create podcasts. We could get a really targeted audience, and we're able to basically continue with what we're doing. And instead of just having one season and it being done, you could have a second season, a third season, a fourth season. And that was really kind of how it all came about and how it started. And thankfully we met Dylan, because I don't know how long we could have lasted with just creating branded content and not having the listenership.
For sure. And that first product that you're mentioning that you collaborated with him on and developed in-house was Audience Brand Builder. And so let's talk a little bit about that, because it is really unique the way that we go about building brands for audiences, especially if the podcast is more of a B2B angle. Because it's one thing to make a pop culture podcast about sports or a TV show, and then you just have like this general audience that shows an interest and you grow listeners, and maybe you can monetize it, maybe you don't. But if you're Unilever, if you're Ford, you're thinking either we're trying to use this as a mechanism to connect with high value individuals that are going to drive ROI for our business, or it's thought leadership. And in that case, we also want to make sure that people are listening to it. But I think what's really unique about Audience Brand Builder compared to the other podcast growth options that are out there, and being in the podcast industry for like 7 years, I've tried literally all of them, is the ability to be super hyper targeted with the people that you're reaching. And so if you're used to performance marketing, if you're used to being able to have this whole dashboard of targeting options and interest targeting and demographic targeting at your disposal to drive conversions that didn't previously exist for podcasts, you just kind of like threw it out there and hoped the right person engaged with it. So talk to me a little bit about the creation process of Audience Brand Builder and why it became such a big hit for brands that wanted to not just make great content, but connect with their ideal listener at a super specific level.
Well, we learned really quickly that brand managers, marketing folks really cared about data and listenership and who was listening and how we were targeting people. Remember, we come from a business where our past business was creating these lavish experiences to go to the Super Bowl and meet players, and you really couldn't quantify that. You'd bring your best customers and they might put in an order, but it was never of like, hey, here's the data, here's how many orders we got after this, or whatever it might have been. So really the important thing here in terms of Audience Brand Builder was it was perfect, is perfect for B2B podcasts. And what I mean by B2B podcasts are podcasts we started creating that they were really interested, these companies, in targeting, let's say, enterprise buyers of their products. So if you are a software company, you might be interested in targeting CIOs. If you were a healthcare company, you might be interested in targeting hospital procurement people. And this product is so incredible with its targeting capability that whether it was demographics, infographics, or contextually relevant content that we would gather, we were able to go and target that specific person. So not only would, let's say a software company get 3,000 listeners, but the 3,000 listeners were people who actually could turn into big time buyers of their big time buyers of their product, and would pay for what they paid us for the podcast 1,000 times over from one order, right? So that was the incredible thing about Audience Brand Builder and why it continues. I mean, uh, 2 orders in today for 2 companies, one a healthcare, one a tech company, who are using it because they really, really want to target those folks, and it works extremely well.
Yeah, what would you say? Is it like 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10 of the brands that work with Amaze Media Labs to produce a branded podcast end up also getting audience growth as a part of it?
Yeah, it's funny. It started maybe 6 out of 10, and we're gonna put it on social. We're gonna send emails. We're gonna have our salespeople. Then it was 8 out of 10. It's almost 10 out of 10. We actually just say you will be much better off if you are doing an external facing podcast, and you really want to target the right listeners. You want to turbocharge your podcast. You know what? Do less episodes if you don't have the budget, but make sure you include some type of audience growth. And of course, in the B2B world, meaning, include Audience Brand Builder.
Yeah. And, when we think about Innovate or Die, the podcasts and the people we're going to be talking to and the questions and conversations we're going to be holding, it's really about those key moments and decisions where you see an opportunity and you do something that's unproven. And we're going to be basically asking them to share all their secrets of that. Like, how did you do that? What was that decision process like? How did you decide to do X instead of Y? And, and so even for our own story, we plan on sharing the behind the scenes so that we can live in real time these principles. And so if you're listening and you're a CMO at a company, or if you're in charge of brand development or a product marketer, that you can take these principles, these insights, and apply them to your company and to your strategy as well. And so going from Audience Brand Builder, basically the number one audience development platform for branded podcasts and B2B podcasts, it still wasn't yet what it could be. And so even discovering something that was truly a game changer for branded podcasts, Trailergram was really the first consumer-driven audience growth platform. And you guys launched that at Podcast Movement last year, right?
Yeah, we literally just launched it. It was at Podcast Movement, which was last August, right? August 2023. And literally within, what are we at now? Here in
February
2024, we're basically, several months into this and have signed on, over maybe 200 different networks, production companies, producers, and the reason being, and I'll get into Trailergram and why it works so well. Again, this was something I got to give credit. He thought of the idea as well, and then took it to Dylan and was like, "Hey, we had sold our last business to creative artist agency, and we saw how well film trailers did for films. And Brett had this idea, like, what about like trailers for podcasts, and why not use the same ad tech and machine learning AI we were using for Audience Brand Builder, and utilize it for trailers." And that was kind of the thought behind it. But the difference was that Trailergram, instead of, we were super targeted with Audience Brand Builder, and it would cost anywhere from, 45 cents to $1, let's say, a download, depending on how targeted you got. Our average cost with Trailergram now, when you look at it, is, probably somewhere between 5 and 15 cents a download. And that opened up an incredible new world. It opened up publishers, and it opened up folks who now could really monetize their podcasts, where prior, when we were doing branded podcasts, yes, they can monetize it, and one person could listen to it. Like we talked about, a CIO from a software company, and buy millions of dollars of product because they liked what they were hearing. But Trailergram really was the product, or is the product, that right now is just taking over, and we can get into like some of the elements, and again, to get back to what I love, and I'll give you, of course, the credit for coming up with Innovate or Die, which is a great name, and also just shows you, like, how we've had to innovate so many times already. I never even thought about that prior to you coming up with this idea, but right, we had to innovate from couldn't do experiences with podcasts, had to create branded podcasts. Well, if we didn't innovate and figure out how to do audience development, we were going to die. And then with Trailergram, if we didn't figure out a way to create a product that was much less expensive, that big publishers and networks could utilize, then the business wasn't going to be big enough to be sustainable. So, right. So it's really interesting how now we have both Audience Brand Builder, which we're still selling and doing well, and it's perfect for brands, and Trailergram.
Yeah, it's funny how need is the mother of invention. It's like when something has to happen, you figure it out. One observation I'll make publicly here on the podcast: it seems like we could say Brett is the brains and Rob is the biceps of Amaze Media Labs. That's what it keeps coming back to. It was Brett's idea.
Yeah. I will have to give Brett is a lot smarter than he appears. I will definitely have to tell you that. I have learned that over the years, because if you've had a chance to hear him talk or speak and it's not his thing, like, you wouldn't get that. But he actually, what's made us a great partnership and great duo, is that he's very talented operationally, and also thinking ahead and what will work, and what you need to do to really kind of keep a business going. He's also actually a good salesperson, which you don't find that as well. In fact, I believe, bringing you into the picture, that is how you found us, was through Brett, and you actually tested our product. And I remember Brett just telling me, I talked to this really smart guy, and, in typical Brett fashion. And like, I just think he's using our product. He's used everything. He was super smart. And of course, then I found out you were actually a rocket scientist, which is kind of funny to me.
It's true. True story.
Which is true. And then I talked to you the first time. I was like, this guy is pretty smart. And you loved the product, and that was a great sign. But going back to the point was that Brett had found you, and even though he's working out 3 times a week now with a trainer, I will still say I'm the muscle behind the business, bodyguard, so to speak, of Dylan and you. But no, but in reality, that is a good observation, and I think you've seen it play out now since we started working together.
For sure. I mean, yeah. So my entry point into this saga that we've just walked through is at Trailergram. So it would have been October, November of 2023. We're recording this in February 2024, so things moved quickly. And now we get to make this together, which is really exciting. And, for me personally, my vantage point, like I mentioned, I've been in the podcasting industry for 7+ years now, and have tried everything, because podcast discoverability is one of the hardest nuts to crack. That's one of the biggest problems with the audio medium. YouTube becoming a bigger player helps some, but that is still kind of like organic, algorithm based. It's a whole nother layer production wise. And so it's not always feasible to just add video, have YouTube love your content and promote it next to Mr. Beast. Like, that's not actually a controllable growth mechanism. And so whenever you get to a scale where you can figure out how to monetize the content itself, whether that's sponsorships and host-read ad reads, selling your own products and services, doing affiliate marketing, any of the ways that podcasters typically monetize, you're doing it based on audience size. If you have a more niche audience, you can charge a higher CPM. If it's a more broad-based audience, it's a lower CPM. But there's always basically like an upper limit to your monetization ability, so to speak, for content. And so in order to create basically a viral growth engine, there has to be a way to basically drive audience growth at a rate less than what you could potentially monetize. And that is what makes Trailergram so exciting, is that because of how we're able to take the AI learning and targeting that we learned and developed with Audience Brand Builder, apply it to a larger scale of audience. And so there, instead of optimizing for like CMOs of pharmaceutical companies with more than 100,000 employees, we can instead optimize towards the people that absolutely love the content you're creating. We're able to drive that audience growth for 5 cents, 6 cents, 7 cents a download. And then if you're operating at a $25 CPM and you have a flagship sponsor and a couple of mid-rolls, now you're profitable on every download you're driving. And the retention just continues to build this snowball effect where you can take your monetization from 1 month, pump it back into audience growth to make the next month even more profitable and have more revenue coming in. And it's this cycle that is feeding itself and allows you to have control over the growth of your content. Whereas before, it was just make something good, hope enough people like it that they share it with their friends, but it was hard to achieve escape velocity. Unless you started a podcast 12 years ago where your name's Oprah, it was virtually impossible to have the ability to decide your own fate as far as how fast you wanted to grow the audience. There were so many things outside of your control. And so the promise of Trailergram, I think, is being able to have that be a predictable growth engine for creators, for publishers, for brands that want to have that escape velocity, that want to be the number one podcast in their niche. Now there's actually a way to do that,
which is 100%. You know, when you look at it and what we've seen, and also from going out there, you know, there's been a lot of different products over the years and people who claim they can get you downloads and you should do this. So there's been a lot, you know, in this industry as a whole, there's been some hesitation, like what really works and what is legit. And again, everything we do is monitored by Cloudflare. You know, it has to be IAB compliant to show up on your hosting platform. That was like the most important thing, you know, for us, is just coming out and being completely credible, upfront, exactly talking about what this product does. And that's worked really well. But what I wanted to say before I jumped into that, because you just had your riff on the whole thing, is this is why I love having you on our team, because see, when you say that and went through that whole thing, like, you sound smart, right? And you are a rocket scientist. I'll give you that. But when I do it, I'm just like, hey, we can get you downloads for pennies. And like, I don't give anyone like how it works. I probably still have no idea. Like, you know, that's the funny thing, because we have Dylan and these geniuses, smart people like yourself and Brett, and it is interesting, and I will tell you, I'm so excited also that, you know, we're doing this Innovate or Die, because I just think from you know, having done How Success Happens for 4 years and getting incredible guests, learning so much, that, you know, one of the things I definitely learned was like every single company I talked to, when I thought about this and you came up with the idea, was like they had to, there's a story in every probably podcast I have done for How Success Happens, where they had to innovate or make a change or take a risk that either catapulted them or it was a mistake, and then they went another way and then pivoted another way. So it is really interesting that we're doing this, and I just had to let you know that I'm very happy you could be the person who can explain this now.
Yeah, we'll just clip the episode now whenever you're on a sales call. Be like, just go listen to timestamp 33 minutes of episode 1. Explains everything. Let me know if you have questions, right?
Yes, you'll get much more out of it than listening to me tell you whatever it is. But at the same time, it really is what the most incredible thing is coming from building businesses that were mostly were agencies and not tech driven is just what's opened my eyes has just been this, Trailergram specifically and how tech works and the fact you can reach, millions of literally millions of people. We're getting impressions where, I've always been this grinder who's making one phone call at a time and getting a customer and it's just incredible where like someone like Dylan, who's our engineer, would laugh at that, right? Like, I don't think he's ever picked up the phone probably and called the client. Well, actually, he has. He's gotten yelled at. He told me, he doesn't come, but he creates a product that now there is, like you said, no reason that anyone who is in this game in creating content and monetizing it would not utilize it because it works from a financial perspective. In fact, if you had the dollars, if we did, if whoever it is who's creating this, it's like an arbitrage system. It's the more downloads you get and what they go for in audio. And if you got to have good content too, right? Because people got to listen. But if you do have that good content, now you have discoverability and now you have a way to monetize and keep growing.
Yeah. So that's, for us internally, there are certainly other podcast agencies that can make a great content for a brand that wants to do a podcast and do a video podcast and things like that. Where we're innovating and where we're going to continue to grow and kind of share our product development roadmap as it unfolds is in building audience. I think that's what Amaze Media Labs does better than anyone. And we have the unique ability to drive audience at a scale and at a cost that makes it a no-brainer for people that before it just didn't make sense. The ROI was not there to throw $10 into something and make $1 back. And we're focused on fixing that. Now, moving forward, we'll continue to share updates about our own progress, our own product development, the things we're working on, the things that we're learning. So you can learn from our mistakes instead of repeating them and making your own.
And there's a lot of them. You can definitely, and I will tell you, it's a little scary for me, and I love it though, but like putting it out there at this point because, failure for so many people, for everyone, myself, like, as I said, even after creating 2 companies that have done well and was so fearful of this business going and we're, it's what's great is that you can learn from all of this and what's going on and we're going to put ourselves out there and there are going to be a lot of failures, a lot of pivots. And I hope that really just helps people interested in just the story. And we're going to have some great guests who've really when people see who's going to be coming on and the list of folks and who've really innovated. I mean, I think what we're building here and what Dylan's done, I mean, it's revolutionary for the podcast industry. We're going to have guests who have revolutionized industries like food, right? And technology and AI. And it's going to be super interesting because what I love about it is that, in all these cases, I know just from my other podcasts that they had to innovate or they were done. And it's a scary thought, but it definitely gets you up off the couch.
For sure. And we can actually, as we wrap up, drop a little bit of news, an update in real time. So what was first Trailergram, focused on promoting podcast trailers, we are officially rebranding as audiencelift as of the day this episode goes out. It's official. Website will be done. You can go to audiencelift.com to see the new and improved version of our Trailergram product. And the reason that we're pivoting the name is because there are some other applications that we're working on. So it's not just going to be about podcast growth and development. There's going to be some other platforms, some other mediums. So you definitely want to stay tuned and see whether you're producing content, video content, social media content, audio content. there's something coming down the pipeline for you. And we're excited to share that with you. So go to audiencelift.com to check out what we got currently. And make sure to come back for future episodes. There will be some where it's just me and Rob talking about what we're working on, the development of our own products at Amaze Media Labs, things we're learning. But the bulk of them will be guests, and they'll either be brands that you know or people that you recognize. And so we're excited about peeling back the curtain and sharing the best practices from their own innovation and the things that they're doing to move the market. All right. Anything else you got, Rob, before we wrap it up?
Just got to say, like you said, coming out with Audience Lift, and you always have to be innovating. And that's what's really, especially with this business, Amaze Media Labs, and technology and what we're doing. It's just like if we didn't innovate. But, now that I think about it and go back, Brett also had another great idea. Like we were for our last business, and just to wrap up, when I think about it, at first we were only doing experiences based around sports, and I got to give the guy props again, but he came up with like, you know what? Celebrity chefs are really big now. This was going back 10 years. He's like, why don't we do experiences with celebrity chefs, and companies would love it. And he was absolutely right. We built the business up in about 3.5, 4 years, and sold it to creative artist agency, and made a lot of money for a lot of chefs, and a lot of companies were able to network. And you just realize, like, what I love about this concept and this idea of this podcast is just you always have to innovate or be innovating, and not to be scared of it. Like, because for me, at first with technology especially, I was like, wait, why didn't this work? Or why, like, I'd go to Dylan and be like, why is it? And it was scary because, I realized, oh, well, then we'd make a change, we'd innovate, and it would get better. Right. And for me, it was in the past, mostly, if we had a problem, there was an issue with a client, we were doing the same thing over and over. And that's why I love what you came up with for the idea in terms of innovate or die. And I can't wait to talk to some of these folks that we have lined up, because they have really been innovators in incredible categories and super relevant for what's going on today. And then, of course, though, some people will have to listen to us sometimes, and hopefully they'll find our failures enjoyable, and we'll take it from there, and hopefully they can learn from that as well.
Absolutely. So come back in 2 weeks, where our first guest interview will go live. You'll find out who it is when it comes out. But when it comes to your business and everything you do everything in your power to not die.